ancient steps have been unveiled at the renowned ancient pool of Siloam in Jerusalem, a site of profound significance in both the New and Old Testaments.
For 2,000 years, this silver scroll sat hidden beneath Jerusalem's streets, containing the oldest biblical text ever found, predating the Dead Sea Scrolls by 400 years. The words etched on it, the same blessing still recited in synagogues and churches today: "May the Lord bless you and keep you." When archaeologists unrolled this fragile artifact from an ancient tomb, they rewrote biblical history overnight, and it's just one of 10 discoveries that have left experts speechless. The silver scrolls that rewrote biblical history. Imagine holding an artifact so delicate that a single wrong move could destroy evidence of Scripture's existence 2,700 years ago. In the 1970s, archaeologists working in Jerusalem's Ketef Hinnom tombs made a discovery that would shatter everything we thought we knew about biblical history. Hidden within ancient burial chambers were 2 tiny silver scrolls, each smaller than your pinky finger. For 3 years, specialists worked under microscopes, painstakingly unrolling these paper-thin sheets of precious metal. The tension was unbearable. Would the text survive or crumble to dust? When the scrolls finally revealed their secrets, biblical scholars were stunned. Etched into the silver were words from the Book of Numbers, the priestly blessing beginning, "May Yahweh bless you and keep you." Dating to approximately 600 BCE, these scrolls instantly became the oldest biblical text ever discovered, predating the famous Dead Sea Scrolls by 4 centuries. Every assumption about when biblical passages were first written down suddenly required revision. But here's where things get truly bizarre. These weren't ceremonial objects stored in a temple vault. They were personal protective amulets designed to be worn against the skin. This proves ordinary people incorporated Scripture into their daily lives centuries before scholars believed such texts existed. The next time you hear that blessing at a wedding or religious ceremony, remember you're experiencing the exact same words someone cherished 2,700 years ago. The tombs themselves tell us even more. Featuring massive 9-foot stone thresholds and multiple chambers, they belonged to Jerusalem's elite. You can almost smell the ancient perfumes and burial spices that once filled these spaces. Feel the cool limestone against your fingertips. Hear the echoing footsteps of mourners who placed these precious scrolls alongside their loved ones. This revolutionary find forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about when biblical texts first circulated. If these passages existed in written form nearly 6 centuries before Christ, what other scripture might have been recorded earlier than we imagine? And if the Bible preserves such ancient texts accurately, could it also guide archaeologists to other hidden treasures beneath Jerusalem's streets? The Bible as an archaeological treasure map. Does Scripture actually function like a legitimate treasure map? For over a century, archaeologists have been testing this radical idea, using biblical passages to pinpoint excavation sites across Jerusalem, and their success rate is astonishing. In 1913, Jewish archaeologist Raymond Wild pioneered this approach, using biblical verses to locate King David's tomb in Jerusalem's oldest quarter. The methodology is surprisingly straightforward. Identify specific locations mentioned in Scripture, analyze geographical details, then dig precisely where the text indicates. When the Bible describes King Hezekiah extending Jerusalem's walls, archaeologists excavate exactly where mentioned and frequently discover fortifications dating precisely to his reign. This next discovery left veteran archaeologists speechless. In 1880, a young boy chasing a frog accidentally discovered Hezekiah's tunnel, a 1,750-foot water channel carved through solid bedrock, exactly where 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles placed it. An ostracon, that's a pottery fragment used like an ancient notepad found near the Temple Mount, contained writing mentioning a house of Yahweh, potentially referring to Solomon's temple. When the Pool of Siloam needed location confirmation, archaeologists followed biblical descriptions, and in 2004 discovered the massive pool precisely where Scripture suggested, complete with ritual steps matching Jewish purification practices. Touch these ancient stones, and you're connecting with the same surfaces mentioned in texts written thousands of years ago. Feel the cool water still flowing through Hezekiah's tunnel, just as it did when Assyrian armies threatened Jerusalem. The smooth limestone steps of the Siloam pool have guided countless feet, possibly even those of figures mentioned in the Gospels. While these silver scrolls preserved ancient blessings, across Jerusalem, another discovery would reveal how biblical names carved in limestone can launch global controversies. Clay seals, bearing names of officials mentioned in Jeremiah, have emerged exactly where the prophet placed them in his writings. The Bible's precision extends beyond architecture to these personal artifacts that connect specific individuals to the broader historical narrative. But if Scripture guides excavators so reliably, what about the most controversial biblical site ever uncovered? Could limestone boxes bearing history's most famous name actually contain the remains of Jesus and his family? The answer lies in a 1st century tomb that sparked worldwide debate about Christianity's foundational beliefs. The Talpiot tomb controversy. Why would a simple burial chamber discovered in 1980 trigger international headlines nearly 3 decades later, when construction workers in East Jerusalem accidentally broke through the ceiling of an ancient tomb? They couldn't have imagined the religious earthquake they'd unleash. Inside this unremarkable rock-cut chamber, archaeologists documented 10 limestone ossuaries, bone boxes used after bodies decomposed. But one inscription electrified researchers: Jesus, son of Joseph. Nearby sat boxes labeled Mary, Matthew, and most provocatively, Judah, son of Jesus. The potential implications were staggering. Could this ordinary family tomb contain the actual remains of Jesus of Nazareth? If so, it would directly challenge Christianity's central claim of bodily resurrection. For years, the discovery remained relatively obscure until filmmaker Simcha Jakobowiczi's 2007 documentary, The Lost Tomb of Jesus, thrust it into the global spotlight. The film presented statistical analyses, claiming the combination of these particular names appearing together was astronomically improbable, suggesting this really was Jesus' family. But look closely at this seemingly ordinary stone box. The inscription isn't nearly as clear as the documentary suggested. Most archaeologists immediately pushed back against the sensational claims. Names like Yeshua, Jesus, and Joseph were extraordinarily common in 1st century Judea, appearing in roughly 25% of male burial. Finding them together is like discovering graves marked John and Mary in a modern cemetery. Hardly remarkable. These ancient toilets revealed something unexpected. DNA testing on residue from the ossuaries could only determine that individuals weren't maternally related, not that they were Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as the documentary implied. The tomb itself matched dozens of others belonging to wealthy Jerusalem families, with no distinctive features connecting it to Jesus' followers, who primarily came from Galilee rather than Jerusalem. Listen to the cool air whispering through this limestone chamber that remained sealed for nearly 2 millennia. Touch the rough-hewn surfaces of ossuaries that once held the bones of an ordinary Jerusalem family, whose names accidentally mirrored biblical figures. While mainstream scholarship firmly rejects any connection to Jesus of Nazareth, the controversy demonstrates how a single archaeological find can ignite worldwide debate. But if one controversial tomb can generate such attention, why has archaeology's most famous biblical building never been definitively found? Where is the legendary structure that once housed the Ark of the Covenant, King Solomon's Temple? The search for Solomon's Temple. Why has archaeology's most famous building never been found? According to biblical accounts, King Solomon constructed a magnificent temple in Jerusalem around the 10th century BCE, adorned with gold, cedar, and precious stones. Yet despite decades of searching, not one stone has been conclusively identified as belonging to this legendary structure. The challenge isn't lack of effort, it's location. Solomon's temple reportedly stood atop Jerusalem's Temple Mount, now home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Religious sensitivities make comprehensive excavation impossible. Archaeologists must instead hunt for peripheral evidence or examine debris removed during limited construction projects. This restriction creates archaeology's ultimate challenge, investigating history's most famous building without actually being able to dig where it stood. The mystery deepens when considering destruction. Babylonian forces devastated Jerusalem in 587 BCE. And subsequent rebuilding projects, particularly Herod the Great's massive Temple Mount expansion, likely repurposed any remaining material. Yet tantalizing clues have emerged. A pottery fragment found near the Temple Mount mentions a House of Yahweh, potentially referring to Solomon's temple. Even more intriguing, excavations at Tel Motza, just outside Jerusalem, revealed a smaller temple from the 9th century BCE, with architectural features remarkably similar to biblical descriptions of Solomon's temple, including an entrance hall, main chamber, and Holy of Holies. Feel the rough-cut stones at Tel Motza beneath your fingertips. Stones potentially shaped by the same architectural tradition that built Solomon's grander sanctuary. Breathe in the earthy scent of ancient dust, virtually unchanged since workers laid these foundations nearly 3 millennia ago. The Temple Mount Sifting Project, which examines soil removed during construction, continually recovers small artifacts dating to the First Temple period, tantalizing hints of what lies beneath one of Earth's most contested religious sites. But if Solomon's temple remains archaeology's greatest missing landmark, another royal mystery involves a tomb venerated in the wrong location for centuries. For generations, pilgrims have streamed to a site on Mount Zion revered as King David's tomb, but archaeological evidence suggests they're praying in the wrong place entirely. Could millions of visitors be venerating an empty medieval monument while the true royal necropolis lies elsewhere in Jerusalem? The mystery of King David's tomb. Could millions of pilgrims be visiting the wrong tomb? For centuries, visitors have streamed to a stone cenotaph on Mount Zion, believing they're praying at King David's final resting place. Religious Jews sway in fervent prayer, Christians take contemplative photographs, and tourists flip through guidebooks at what tradition holds is the burial site of Israel's most celebrated king. There's just one enormous problem. The Bible explicitly states David was buried in the city of David, Jerusalem's oldest district located south of today's Old City Wall. This geographical contradiction reveals how sacred traditions can develop independently from historical reality. The Mount Zion identification gained prominence during the Crusader period when European Christians misidentified Jerusalem's topography. They constructed an impressive cenotaph that evolved through centuries of veneration, passing from Christian to Muslim to Jewish control. The current tomb structure features Gothic architectural elements that couldn't possibly date to David's era, instead reflecting medieval European design. Meanwhile, excavations in the actual city of David have uncovered monumental tombs dating precisely to the First Temple period, the correct time frame for David's burial. One impressive complex, designated T1, features sophisticated stonework consistent with royal Judahite tombs. Its location perfectly matches biblical geography, positioned within Jerusalem's original city limits during David's reign. The drainage tunnel beneath T1 is barely shoulder width, with a low ceiling that forces you to hunch over. The cool, damp stones still bear chisel marks from ancient hands. As you move deeper, the light fades, and for a moment you feel the same darkness that surrounded mourners 3,000 years ago. If these walls could speak, would they confirm they once housed Israel's greatest king? This discrepancy between archaeological evidence and popular tradition demonstrates how sacred geography evolves. The Mount Zion site gained special significance for Jewish worshippers during the 1948 to 1967 period, when the Western Wall was inaccessible. As the closest available site to traditional Jewish holy places, David's tomb became a surrogate worship location. Even after Israeli forces gained control of the old city, the Mount Zion tradition was too deeply entrenched to fade. The stones themselves tell one story, while centuries of devotion tell another. But geographical confusion isn't limited to royal tombs. Just across the city lies Christianity's holiest shrine, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Does archaeological evidence actually support the traditional identification of Jesus' crucifixion and burial site, or is this another case of misplaced veneration? The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Archaeological evidence. Was Christianity's holiest site once a pagan temple? Beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre's maze of chapels, domes, and competing Christian denominations lies an archaeological puzzle spanning 2 millennia. This Jerusalem landmark is revered as the site of Jesus' crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. But what physical evidence supports this traditional identification? The archaeological record reveals a fascinating layered history, beginning with Emperor Hadrian, who built a temple to Venus on this spot around 135 CE, likely a deliberate attempt to obliterate a location already venerated by early Christians. When Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity in the 4th century, his mother, Helena, identified this site as Jesus' tomb. Constantine demolished Hadrian's temple and built a magnificent church. Over subsequent centuries, this structure was repeatedly damaged, destroyed, and rebuilt, including near-complete demolition by Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim in 1009 and major reconstruction by Crusaders in the 12th century. But what makes archaeologists take this traditional identification seriously? Excavations beneath the church have uncovered compelling evidence. Remnants of a limestone quarry later converted into gardens and tombs during the 1st century CE. This matches gospel descriptions of Jesus being buried in a rock-cut tomb located in a garden. More significantly, geological analysis confirms the site stood outside Jerusalem's walls during Jesus' lifetime, as required for crucifixion sites, but was later incorporated within expanded city boundary. Stand inside the cool, dim interior where incense has perfumed the air for centuries. Place your hands on worn stone steps polished by millions of pilgrim feet across 2 millennia. In 2016, researchers gained rare access to the edicule, the shrine covering Jesus' tomb, during restoration work. When they temporarily removed marble cladding covering the burial bed, they discovered the original limestone surface potentially untouched since the 1st century. For 50 hours, scientists documented this ancient rock before sealing it away again, perhaps for centuries. While definitive proof remains elusive, the archaeological evidence strongly supports the traditional identification. The church itself reflects centuries of destruction and rebuilding, physical testimony to Jerusalem's turbulent history and Christianity's endurance. But if one sacred site can be built directly over another, could this pattern appear elsewhere in the Holy Land? At Banias, in northern Israel, archaeologists discovered something remarkable: a Christian church constructed deliberately atop a pagan temple to the Greek god Pan. The Pilgrim's Road, walking where Jesus walked. Why was a monumental street buried beneath Jerusalem for nearly 2,000 years? Hidden below modern neighborhoods lies an archaeological time machine, a perfectly preserved limestone road stretching from the Pool of Siloam up toward the Temple Mount. This massive thoroughfare, once Jerusalem's main artery, vanished after the city's destruction in 70 CE, until archaeologists recently brought it back to light. The engineering specifications are breathtaking: a 600-meter walkway comprised of massive limestone slabs, many weighing several tons, arranged in a distinctive step pattern, facilitating uphill climbing. Coins trapped beneath the paving stones date construction to approximately 31 CE during Pontius Pilate's governorship. Yes, the same Roman official who sentenced Jesus to death according to gospel accounts. Building this street required quarrying, transporting, and precisely placing an estimated 10,000 tons of stone. A monumental feat even by modern standards. This wasn't just any street, it was Jerusalem's primary processional route during major Jewish festivals. Imagine thousands of pilgrims, freshly bathed in the pool of Siloam's ritual waters, ascending this grand thoroughfare toward the temple. The road's width allowed large crowds to flow upward, while its step design provided secure footing even when wet. Excavations revealed remains of shops lining both sides, a bustling marketplace catering to religious visitors. Stand on these ancient paving stones, and you're walking exactly where pilgrims trod during the time of Jesus. Feel these massive limestone slabs beneath your feet, stones potentially crossed by figures mentioned in the Gospels. The road's construction quality is so impressive that portions remain perfectly intact after 2 millennia buried underground. But this street's story ends in catastrophe. In 70 CE, Roman legions crushed Jerusalem's revolt, destroying the city and slaughtering thousands. The road was buried beneath tons of debris. Fallen buildings, smashed pottery, and architectural fragments testified to violent destruction. For nearly 2,000 years, it remained sealed underground, preserved by the very disaster that ended its use. Today, portions of this street have been opened to visitors, who can literally walk in ancient footsteps. But this remarkable preservation raises an intriguing question. If the road remained intact, what might have happened in the drainage channel running beneath it during Jerusalem's final hours? Why would desperate residents flee into sewers as their city burned above them? And what evidence of this tragic moment did they leave behind? The drainage channel, last refuge of a dying city. Why would ancient Jews hide in sewers? In 70 CE, Jerusalem faced imminent destruction. Roman legions commanded by future Emperor Titus had surrounded the city, constructing siege ramps and battering the wall. Inside, starvation spread as food supplies dwindled. Jewish zealots refused surrender despite mounting casualties. When Roman battering rams finally breached the defenses, thousands of desperate residents needed somewhere, anywhere, to hide. The answer lay beneath their feet. Directly under the Grand Pilgrim's Road ran an elaborate drainage system, stone-lined channels designed to carry rainwater and waste away from the city center. As buildings burned and Roman soldiers advanced through the streets, these underground passages became the last refuge for those fleeing slaughter or enslavement. The drainage tunnel is barely shoulder width, with a low ceiling that forces you to hunch over. The cool, damp stones still bear chisel marks from ancient hands. As you move deeper, the light fades, and for a moment, you feel the same darkness that terrified families fleeing Roman soldiers. Modern excavators describe the eerie sensation of entering these ancient passages, the weight of history pressing down from above, knowing you're retracing the desperate escape route of Jerusalem's final defenders. When archaeologists cleared 2 millennia of accumulated silt from these channels, they uncovered heartbreaking evidence of this final stand. Cooking pots still containing charred food, oil lamps with soot marks showing recent use, personal valuables hurriedly gathered, and scattered coins from the Jewish revolt bearing inscriptions of freedom for Zion. Perhaps most remarkable was finding a Roman soldier's sword still in its leather scabbard, dropped during pursuit of refugees or taken as plunder by someone hiding below. But the most poignant discovery was a simple stone carving of a menorah, not the traditional 7-branched candelabrum, but a 5-branched version, etched by someone who had perhaps glimpsed the actual temple menorah before fleeing. This crude drawing, hastily scratched onto stone, represents one of the earliest known depictions of this sacred object by someone who might have witnessed it firsthand. First-century historian Josephus validates these archaeological finds, describing Jews hiding in subterranean caverns, while Romans methodically hunted them down. His chilling account comes alive as we examine these artifacts, tangible evidence of Jerusalem's final hours. But while this drainage channel preserves tragedy, another nearby excavation offers unprecedented insights into Jerusalem's defensive engineering. What massive structure protected the city for centuries before being forgotten beneath layers of rubble? The ancient moat, Jerusalem's forgotten defense. Could an enormous defensive structure remain hidden beneath Jerusalem for millennia? For 150 years, scholars puzzled over biblical references to a massive trench or millow mentioned in Kings and Chronicles. Was it merely a literary flourish, or did such a defensive feature actually exist? The answer came through recent excavations in the Givati parking lot area, an enormous artificial trench measuring at least 9 meters deep and 30 meters wide, deliberately carved through solid bedrock. This wasn't just a modest ditch, but a massive engineering project requiring thousands of workers removing tons of limestone using only primitive tools. The moat's dimensions are staggering, deep enough that attacking armies couldn't easily cross it, and wide enough to keep siege engines at a safe distance from city walls. This discovery fundamentally alters our understanding of ancient Jerusalem's defenses, demonstrating its rulers commanded sophisticated engineering capabilities and substantial labor forces. Standing at the edge of this excavation induces vertigo. You're peering into an engineered canyon deliberately created to protect the city's vulnerable northern approach. Imagine ancient workers suspended on ropes, chiseling away at limestone cliffs to create this defensive barrier. The stone dust would have filled the air, coating workers' skin as they labored under the Mediterranean sun. The finished structure would have presented an imposing first impression to anyone approaching Jerusalem. Dating evidence suggests potential origins in the Middle Bronze Age, nearly 3,800 years ago, with continued use through the First Temple period. This timeline aligns with biblical references to defensive works constructed by various kings. Intriguingly, British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon partially uncovered this structure during 1960s excavations, but misidentified it as a natural valley rather than a human-made feature. Reanalysis of her field notes confirms she had actually found the western portion of this massive defensive system. This ancient toilets revealed something unexpected. Analysis of soil layers within the moat shows it collected rainwater during winter months, creating a seasonal water barrier while serving defensive purposes year-round. The moat's design demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both military defense and water management, skills vital in this semi-arid region. While Jerusalem's moat represents ancient engineering, other discoveries reveal connections to surprisingly recent history. During renovation of an early 20th century hospital building, researchers discovered ornate British coats of arms belonging to King George V, Edward Cecil Guinness of brewing fame, and other British aristocrats who funded its construction during the Mandate period. These carved emblems represent yet another layer in Jerusalem's archaeological record, proving the city's historical puzzle extends right into the modern era. Temple Mount excavations, controversy, and discovery. What makes the Temple Mount archaeology's most contested 37 acres? This Jerusalem plateau represents ground zero for biblical archaeology, revered by Jews as the site of their ancient temples, by Muslims as Haram al-Sharif, containing the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, and significant to Christians for Jesus' activities there. Despite its archaeological importance, comprehensive excavation remains politically impossible. This restriction forces researchers to piece together history from limited evidence, working primarily around the platform's edges or examining material removed during restricted construction projects. Along the southern and western walls, archaeologists have documented monumental Herodian architecture, including ritual baths, mikvaot, that's mikvaot, ritual purification pools Jews used before entering the temple precincts. These installations, perfectly preserved with steps dividing pure from impure sides, match Talmudic descriptions exactly. The Western Wall tunnels revealed massive foundation stones, weighing over 500 tons each, architectural marvels requiring advanced engineering to transport and position without modern equipment. But the most innovative archaeological approach involves the Temple Mount Sifting Project, established to examine soil removed during unauthorized construction. When the Islamic Waqf conducted renovations in 1999, approximately 9,000 tons of debris were removed without archaeological supervision. Israeli archaeologists salvaged this material and established a systematic sifting operation, allowing volunteers to recover thousands of artifacts spanning 3 millennia. Look closely at this seemingly ordinary stone, a tiny seal impression bearing an ancient Hebrew name mentioned in Jeremiah 38:1, Gedaliah son of Pashur. This minuscule clay seal, pressed by a biblical figure's personal signet ring, emerged from Temple Mount soil, connecting physical evidence to specific individuals named in Scripture. Similar finds include coins from every period of Jerusalem's history, pottery fragments, architectural elements, and even gaming pieces used by Roman soldiers. Recent scientific analysis of Temple Mount drainage channels revealed evidence of ancient parasites in preserved waste, confirming that even Jerusalem's elite suffered from intestinal diseases mentioned in biblical health codes. This microscopic evidence connects Scripture to daily biological realities of ancient inhabitants. Political sensitivities surrounding the Temple Mount seem unlikely to diminish, meaning comprehensive archaeological investigation remains improbable. Yet researchers continue developing innovative approaches to study this crucial site without excavation, including ground-penetrating radar, photogrammetry of exposed surfaces, and compositional analysis of building material. Each small discovery adds another piece to history's most contested puzzle. But if Solomon's temple truly stood on the Temple Mount, why haven't archaeologists found its foundation stones? The answer may lie in layers of subsequent construction and destruction that have repeatedly transformed Jerusalem's most contested ground over 3 millennia of continuous occupation. Thanks for watching another episode. While you are still here, make sure to click the video on your screen for more quality content.